Howdy there, people of the internet. It's me again, Will, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Taco Podcast. Today, we're taking a look at autism as part of the Autism Awareness campaign that is currently ongoing with the Autism Society of America. We're taking a test today. You are going to take a test, to see if you're actually somewhere on the spectrum itself. So you need a piece of paper, a pencil, a crayon, a pen, whatever you have, a piece of cardboard, something, just so you can keep a running total on the actual test. These are rated. You're going to get 4 different options from a 4 to a 0 for each and every one of the questions. And then at the end of it, I will tell you, if you fall within a certain score, for the entire thing, the likelihood is that you are autistic. Now, I must precursor this with saying that I am not a doctor. This is, as scientific as I would like for this to be. It's not complete. If you feel that you may be on the actual autism spectrum, the best thing to do is to first speak with your family physician and start there. They can then refer you to someone who can actually give you a complete and proper test to see if you are actually on the spectrum. First question, and there are quite a few pages here. Are you really, really good at a skill like math or music, but struggle to succeed in other areas? Now, these are the answers are rated from 4 to 0. So your answer would be yes, very often. That's a 4. Often a 3. Sometimes a 2. Rarely a 1. Or never doesn't apply to you, a 0. So are you really, really good at a skill like math or music, but struggle in other areas? 4 to 0. Rate yourself now. So we'll go on to the next question. Next question. Is your memory like a steel trap, even for facts that you don't fully understand? Do you hear, and absorb facts into your mind, and it's there, and you have it forever, and you never forget it? It's like a steel trap. Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. So very often, again, is 4, and never happens to you, a 0. Rate yourself on that one. Next question. Have you always wanted a best friend in life, but never found one? Never was able to connect with someone that you would call a best friend? Very often, 4. Often, a 3. Sometimes, a 2. Rarely, a 1. Or never has happened to you, does not apply, a 0. Next question. Do you prefer to read nonfiction over fiction books? Very often, a 4. Often, a 3. Sometimes, a 2. Rarely a 1, or never, or not, does not apply, a 0. Excuse me. Next question. Do your family members lovingly refer to you as an eccentric professional of the family? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, does not apply. Next question. Do you talk to friends at parties the same way you would talk to a coworker in the office or in a business situation? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or doesn't apply, is a 0. Next question. Are you always bumping into things or tripping over your own feet? Some people refer to this as you have 2 left feet. You're awkward in life and just getting around. Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Next question. Are you always the first one to notice when friends have gotten a haircut or made small changes of their appearance? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, does not apply. How are we doing so far? I hope we're plugging along here and you're keeping up. Again, these are rated from 4 to 0. There is no 5s. There's no 3 million. 4 to 0. Next question. Do you prefer to play individual games in sports like golf where everyone works for themselves instead of working as part of a team? Again, very often is a 4. Often is a 3. Sometimes a 2. Rarely is a 1. Or never is a 0 or does not apply. Next question. Are expressions like curiosity killed the cat or don't count your chickens before they hatch odd to you or very hard for you to even comprehend what the actual meaning behind something like that is? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Next question. When you're having a conversation with someone, do you prefer to look at a wall, their shoes, or anywhere else except for making direct eye contact with them? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Next question. Do you have trouble understanding what people mean when they say they feel embarrassed for someone else? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Hope we're keeping up, ladies and gentlemen. We're breezing through these pretty quick. Next question. Did bullies in school, doesn't matter what grade, or level you were in school, could be all the way to graduate school. Did bullies target you in school? Very often, 4. Often, 3. Sometimes, 2. Rarely, 1. Or never, 0. Or does not apply. Next question. Do you or did you enjoy inventing your own words or expressions that might seem quirky to others? Quirky. Again, very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Next question. Do people say that you speak like a robot? Very often, 4. Often, 3. Sometimes, 2. Rarely, 1. Or 0 for never or does not apply. Next question. Even when you're in a quiet place like a library, do you find yourself making involuntary noises like clearing your throat or clicking your teeth together over and over again? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Excuse me. I gotta get some coffee. My throat's kind of itchy today. Ooh, kind of fogged up my glasses there a little bit. All right. Hope we're keeping up. Next question. Think about your daily routine. Would you say you follow the same schedule day in, day out, every week, and don't like unexpected events? Would you say very often? 4. Often, a 3. Sometimes, 2. Rarely, 1. Or never, or does not apply. Next question. When recalling events from recent past, now when you say recent past, they're talking about sometime between right now and the last 90 days, okay? In that period of time, recent events. Do you picture everything as a photograph in time, or is there actual video that recalls in your memory of the actual event. Is it very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never does not apply? Next question. Do you have issues with flashing or strobing lights? Maybe it's Christmas time and there are lights on a Christmas tree or lights on a lamppost for the celebrations of a holiday, whatever it may be. They're not necessarily lights from a police car behind you. That's a whole nother subject altogether. Do flashing lights, strobing lights, bother you? Is it very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Next question. We're breezing right through these, ladies and gentlemen. Think about your daily routine again. Do you have issues when people change their routine from what you expected of them? Is it often? Very often. Very often 4. Often 3. Sometimes 2. Rarely 1. Or never 0, or does not apply. Next question. Do you get angry when you encounter someone clapping their hands in congratulations for an event or individual? Is it very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Next question. Are you unable to express complete emotions of happiness, sadness, or anger to even those who are the closest to you, parents or siblings, people who are very close to you, in your actual day-to-day life? Are you unable to express a complete emotion to them? And therefore you feel disconnected and you wonder why you're unable to express these complete emotions to them of how you're feeling. Is it very often? Often 3. Sometimes 2. Rarely 1. Or never 0 does not apply. Next question. Do you tap your fingers, on something, or your foot on the floor involuntary, especially when you're laughing or excited for something that is about to happen? Is it very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never does not apply? Next, do you find it difficult to make direct eye contact with individuals that you just met? You're walking down the street, you meet someone, or maybe you're going in for a job or interview, you cannot make direct eye contact with them. Instead of making direct eye contact with the individual, a lot of people who will answer this question will look at the throat, they'll look at the shoulder, they'll look at their shoes, they'll look at something else, or maybe they'll look at something above the individual's head, but not direct eye-to-eye contact. Do you find that you have this issue very often? Sometimes. Very often, sometimes is 2, rarely 1, and never 0 does not apply. Next question. Do you find it easier to connect with the world via the internet than in small, intimate social situations of less than 3 people? Do you find it easier to connect with the world through this forum of the internet than in small social groups of less than 3 people? 3 or less is the actual question itself. Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, or does not apply. Next question. Do you have an ability that is far beyond anyone else's of the same education or life skills experience or background that for some reason you were able to pick it up and learn and know everything about it without really having to give a large effort to it. Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never does not apply. And then the last question on the test. When listening to music, is the beat of the actual music, the bass or whichever it may be, more important than any other aspect of the song or music itself, including lyrics, everything? Is the bass more important than anything else? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never, zero, does not apply. That is the complete test. Now, I'll give you a little bit to add up your total score. And I'm not a professional. I do not make professional diagnosis. This is just a test, and if you actually put in a adult autism test into your Google or Bing or whatever search engine you use, if you put it in, you'll find a plethora of different tests out there, and some of them will ask the same questions or questions that are worded closely to these. That will give you a complete. You are most likely on the spectrum, but you need to see your primary care physician, your doctor, who can then refer you to someone who can give you a complete test for autism. Now, you might be wondering, well, I scored a 35 on this test. I'm definitely on the spectrum, or I've been diagnosed, with autism when I was a child. Does that mean that, I'm doomed? No, not at all. The same skills of somebody who has autism is the same skill set that makes a Fortune 500 corporate officer, CFO, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Some of them have scored really high on this test because the same skill sets are used in business every single day. Unfortunately, though, at the same time, when it comes to those who are autistic, greater than 70%, 72 to 74%, depending upon where they live in the world and the support network around them, 70% or greater of those who are diagnosed with autism do not have long-term employment or fulfilling long-term employment in their lives. It is a barrier to employment and barrier in life. But if you have and you put the skills around somebody who actually has autism, they can live a full life, and they can live, a life that is rewarding to them as an individual basis. But we have to start young. If your nephew, grandchild, brother, sister, somebody that you know who is under the age of 17, and you're able to get them diagnosed today, the earlier you can get them diagnosed, the better off they will have, and they will learn within their actual skill set. You might have found that, maybe in school you learned a different way. You couldn't learn from a lecture, but you learned hands-on. Maybe you were the oddball, as people called it in school. Maybe you picked up on this, a lot easier than this. You couldn't sit down and write out a term paper, but over here you could do math like that in your head, and the teacher would get frustrated with you because you didn't show your work. Oh, how do you know that in your head? That's the answer. Well, you would say to yourself, am I wrong? No, you're not wrong, but how is it that you know it? Because the school system teaches everybody to line up in a line. And at least here in America, you are going to be this way. And it's not the way to teach children in this world. Nobody learns the same as the next child. And everybody has unique individual skills, just like those who are on the spectrum. Some have, a savant, skills. There are others who are not autistic who have savant skills. But people like to think, well, Rain Man, he had Asperger's syndrome. No, he did not. That is an actual lie. And Asperger's syndrome should never be actually the definition to anyone who has autism. Asperger was, and the doctor himself, Asperger, the Nazi, wanted to experiment on children that he found that were different. Just all he did was take a smaller section of children, say these are it, and then the medical journals and everything else were brainwashed into believing he found something that was unique. Asperger's syndrome is a complete waste of time in diagnosing. And if you have a doctor who says your child or you have Asperger's syndrome, you ask that doctor, where'd you get your medical license at? Because you're wrong. The American Autistic Society, has been out there in the forefront since the 1990s, dispelling that Asperger's syndrome is a real thing. But again, back to Rain Man, people see that as a savant. He can look at toothpicks on the floor and count them like that. He may be on the spectrum of autism, but not every child who has autism has that ability. Not every adult has that ability. One may be able to hear a piece of music one time and be able to recall it and play it again, while others who don't even have Asperger's or autism or whatever you want to call it, all right, we like to call it autism, they may be able to hear it one time and be able to name it. I thought it would be interesting if we went through this autism test together today. Again, if you've scored high on the test and you think that you may have autism, please see your primary care physician who can refer you to an actual doctor to be diagnosed with autism or with not having autism. Maybe you have another barrier to an education. Maybe there is something else that that has been deficient. Maybe you ate a lot of lead chips when you were younger. I don't know. I think I did, because hell, lead paint was everywhere. But that's the answer, ladies and gentlemen. There are millions of us out there who have never been tested, for autism. We went through school and everything else, and nobody ever bothered. Maybe they lumped you into a group of other, children and said, you all are special needs. You all have learning disabilities, but you didn't have a disability. Your mind just works a different way from Tommy or from Bobby or from Sue or from Janet. Your brain works a little bit differently. That's all autism is. It's just a different way that everybody, can take in information and then express it back out to those around them. Doesn't mean that they're any less of an individual. And for the first person out there who tells me that my son or my daughter is any less of an individual, I'll hunt your ass down. Because they mean the world to me, and I will do everything in my power to protect them the rest of my life. Because they deserve every single chance at life and to be happy in this world, just like any other child out there. Thank you for joining me today. You stay safe out there.